What's up guys, it's Manga time once again. I'm here today to bring you my review of Bleach 643, Baby Hold Your Hand 6, Waiting for Love. Who's waiting for love? I'm not entirely sure, but it could possibly be Mayuri, but we'll get into that later. The chapter starts off with Nemu successfully scoring a hit on Pernida, and her Gikon Jurinju attack is literally blowing a hole straight through Pernida's hand, and has essentially torn it asunder. Nemu is, she's falling to the ground, but she has a nice little smirk and a smirk on her face because she thinks she's won, and the artwork is really good as always. Pernida is literally breaking apart here. Like the eyeball is like just turned to mush essentially, and Mayuri kind of is looking on. He probably thinks that Nemu's won as well, and Nemu, slowly falls to the ground, because she was using up a hell of a lot of her soul to do that attack, and it's probably weakened the hell out of her. As she's dropping, Pernida's arm just kind of splits in like half, and Pernida's appears to be fucked. Mayuri looks on, and Nemu kind of looks at Mayuri, and she's like, Mayuri-sama. But anyone who knows Shonen even slightly knows that Nemu is about to be screwed. As she drops, Pernida's remains kind of drop beside her, and then all of a sudden, freaking eyeballs appear all over them, and little mini fingers. Pernida has gone full-on nightmare mode in this chapter, and become really fucking creepy really, really quickly. One of the eyes, seriously, that's disgusting. One of the eyes comes out from underneath the fingernail. The fingernail lifts up, and there's an eye, and it's like, ooh, disgusting and horrible, but just creepy as fuck. I really like the next page, though, because there's a really good sense of despair. I just love the way Nemu is kind of falling, and then suddenly she's just covered in nerves. And I was like, holy shit, it's over. That panel is a it's over panel. Because there's nothing she can do, and Mayuri's looking on like there's nothing I can do. And then Nemu kind of screams, but I like how there's no sound. It's a soundless scream, and then she just explodes. She gets fucking blown up, basically. Pernida rips her apart, essentially. And so Nemu is actually dead. I mean, we all kind of foresaw a character death. Nemu does appear to have been killed. It wasn't quite as epic as I was expecting. Like, I didn't expect it to go that quickly. But Mayuri, has this wide-eye expression on his face, and the blood drops are just, flowing past him. And it's really kind of a gory image, because Nemu's remains essentially splatter on the ground behind Mayuri. And he's, staring on in what is essentially disbelief. Pernida's body begins to reform, except now it's just covered in eyes. I don't quite understand why. Because before it was just, if a body part got blown off, it would have one eye and then the rest of the body would form around it. But now for some reason there's eyes everywhere. But anyway, Mayuri's looking on, and he's like, whoa, my phone's slipping. And he's like, this can't be. Nemu. And for once we're seeing a different side of Mayuri, a rather interesting side of Mayuri. And he's like, oh, Nemu, how can this be? And then, holy fucking shit, Szayel Aporro Granz is there. I gotta say, I didn't see that coming at all, but frankly, I freaking loved it. This is genius by Kubo, absolutely genius. It's such a brilliant way of showing the introspective side of Mayuri without having to have Mayuri say anything, because Mayuri's not a character who often comes across as weak, and he's also not really a character we often see much of, in terms of his inner workings, because he's meant to be a monster. He's meant to be emotionless. And this is such a brilliant way of showcasing how Mayuri is feeling inside by having one of his old nemesis talk to him instead. And so Szayel's kind of mocking him, saying, oh, is that despair I heard in your voice just then, Mayuri? And I just fucking love this. It's so good. It's so well done. And it's just this empty blackness of Mayuri's mind, and Szayel's just kind of sitting next to him now. And it's just so great, because obviously Szayel was not alive. He's in hell at the moment. Mayuri killed him. But now Szayel's back, and he's like, oh, well, what did you say? Maybe my hearing's not what I thought it was, And I just love that Szayel is chastising Mayuri for the very thing that Mayuri chastised Szayel for. Obviously, Szayel is now representing the scientist that Mayuri used to be. Because Szayel was like, oh, it's a man-made creation. How can you feel sad towards this thing? Why are you bothered about its destruction? Obviously, that's how Mayuri used to be, but he grew a connection with Nemu that presumably he never expected to get. And Szayel was just here oh, how can you be bothered? You once told me that you despised perfection. The fact that Nemu's died just proves that she was imperfect. So now you can go back to the drawing board and make something even better. And Szayel was like, that's what it fundamentally means to be a scientist. That's what you told me. But we know that Mayuri as a character has grown a bit since then, and we know that he sees Nemu as something maybe more than a creation. And that's something that Szayel can now understand, and he never did understand before he died. And, he's like, oh, well, is that not your thought process? And then he's like, oh, but I get it. And he has a fucking crazy look on his face. Seriously, the artwork is amazing. Kubo hasn't lost his touch when it comes to drawing his older characters. Szayel looks as creepy, if not creepier, than he ever did. And, Szayel's like, oh, don't tell me that you actually thought that good-for-nothing flesh marionette, he says here, but frankly, Manga Stream could be taking some serious liberties. But he says, oh, don't tell me you thought that good-for-nothing flesh marionette of yours was actually perfect. Don't tell me that's what you think. And Mayuri's eyes just go really wide. Clearly, Mayuri had thought that Nemu was perfect. And he thought that there was no way she could lose. And she did. She died. Because she wasn't perfect. Nothing is. And it's just such a brilliant... Fuck. It's so... This whole... I love this scenario so much. I love that Szayel showed up. It's just really, really good. And he's like, you actually thought she was perfect. You, who once chastised me for trying to find perfection, because obviously Szayel wanted to be a perfect being, that was his whole character, is now belittling Mayuri for essentially thinking he's found the same thing. And he's like, how the mighty have fallen. And I tell you what, I love this because there's a couple of reasons. Obviously, like I said before, we get this introspective look at Mayuri that we don't generally tend to get. And we can see that Mayuri himself thought that he had found perfection, and how he now thinks about that. But it's also great because this is very similar to Komamura, in that Komamura chastised Tozen for wanting to seek revenge, and yet Komamura ended up doing the same thing. And then his grandfather was like, "You need to learn from the way you've changed," and this is exactly the same thing that's happening here. But another reason I love this is because a lot of the time in Bleach, the Shinigami characters, they go through a lot of trials and tribulations, and yet they never come back to mean anything. Like so many of these characters go through so many battles and it means absolutely nothing. Because they never, once they're dead or they've killed their enemy, they never mention them again. I love that Szayel has clearly made a lasting impact on Mayuri, and he has actually returned as part of Mayuri's psyche. That's really cool. And Kubo should bring back more old characters in this way. They don't have to be alive, because Szayel's not alive, he's dead. But it's just really smart. And it shows that Kubo, not only did Kubo not forget about the older stuff, the older stuff actually mattered. It mattered to Mayuri because Szayel's words, his words to Szayel back then, have stayed with him. And Szayel's words now are changing his character still. It's just really good, and it shows that, the fight between Mayuri and Szayel that happened fucking like over 300 chapters ago actually still meant something. And I think it's great. But we get this really creepy panel of Szayel kind of standing there, and Pernida is rebuilding itself, and it looks really gruesome. And Szayel's like, you should be grateful to this abomination of a left arm, because but the fact that it destroyed the creation you thought was perfect has removed this air of hubris that you had about perfection. And so, Szayel was like, the one thing you thought was perfect is now just a memory. And if I were in your shoes, I don't know whether I'd laugh or cry. Laugh about the fact that he can now make something new, or cry because Nemu's dead, obviously. But Mayuri kind of grabs Szayel's face and then just takes him away. And obviously Szayel disappears because he's not real. And Mayuri says, it's just as you say. I had my negligence noticed by a scientist of your ilk. It's, that's... Because obviously Mayuri doesn't like Szayel. And this is when the chapter gets a little bit... I'm not sure I like what happens now. Basically, Pernida comes crashing down on top of the building. And there's actually more of them. Another hand comes up behind it. And for some reason, Pernida now has a mouth. I don't know where that's come from, why it has a mouth. It has a tongue as well. So yeah, I don't quite know why that's happened. But it now tries to eat Nemu. Why? Pernida has never ever been shown to try and eat anything. But of course, when Nemu's involved, she has to be eaten because she's got crap inside her. It's so incredibly convenient, and I actually really don't like the fact that Pernida's... It doesn't make any sense. Why, if Pernida wanted to evolve through Nemu's DNA, then why didn't it just use the stuff it got from its nerves like it did with Kenpachi? Because it has touched Nemu with its nerves on at least 2 occasions. But no, for some reason it's now lapping up Nemu's remains, which is kind of gross. But it's lapping them up, and its teeth are also eyeballs, which is also kind of gross. But I don't know why this is happening. I don't know why it's happening. But regardless. Mayuri then suddenly grabs Nemu's brain. Again, I don't know how the brain survived everything else blowing up, but he literally snatches it straight from a nerve as well. So somehow Mayuri can now stun the nerves. I don't know where any of this is coming from. The end of this chapter is kind of weird. It's a little bit bullshitty. But anyway, Mayuri's like, don't concern yourself with me. Continue eating Nemu's remains, because if you don't do it fast, you're going to die, basically. And so basically, this is all a bit convoluted. Pernida's arm, its fingers all start kind of bubbling. And basically what happens is, Pernida's like, oh my god, what the hell's going on? And what happened was, in order, I'm not sure I understand this completely, but in order for Nemu to survive past the 2-day period, or 2-year period, or however long it was that the Kompaki used to survive for, they basically added something to Nemu that allowed her to continually regenerate over and over and over, so that her cells would just continue going past that end point. So they just, they pushed the boundaries. And so basically but the brain, Nemu's brain, kept it intact, so she didn't just blow up, basically. The brain kept it intact. By having the brain extracted, Pernida has now eaten those regenerative cells, and Pernida is now going to regenerate over and over and over and over again until it literally explodes. And the last page of the chapter is a pretty gruesome picture of Mayuri kind of looking up at the thing going, you're going to explode, essentially, and Pernida literally is like, and its eyeball is like bursting out of its freaking socket. Again, it's a really gross page. Really well drawn though, but I don't think I like it. It's so fucking convenient. Like, seriously, I can kind of buy the regenerative stuff, because that's a legit way, at least I think, for Mayuri to have kept Nemu alive all these years. But how is the brain fine? The brain should have been blown up. And the worst bit is, why the fuck does Pernida try and eat Nemu? That means that just doesn't make any sense. So as you can see, I'm in two minds about this chapter. The Szayel stuff I thought was absolutely genius, and I love putting Nemu's death at the beginning. I thought it was really poignant. But everything else is just what? It's so convenient. And is Pernida dead? I don't know. This fight's been going on for almost 10 chapters now. That was chapter 8, I think, of the fight, pretty much. Is Pernida dead? Maybe, but it's the left arm of the Soul King. I'm going to be so surprised if it dies like that. Either way, though, I have enjoyed this fight a lot, actually. It's been really good, and I sincerely hope the other members of the Schutzstaffel get fights as long as this one. If not longer, going really in depth. But I tell you, if we don't get a flashback or anything for Pernida Parkinjaz, this is going to be such bullshit. Because we need to know about the arm of the Soul King. Maybe Kubo will bring it in later, so that would be fine. But I want something. If Pernida just blows up and that's it, I'm going to be kind of pissed off. But we'll see. For now, I'm going to give this chapter a 4 out of 5. I feel like I'm being generous, but that's because I loved the Szayel stuff way more than I didn't like the end stuff. The end stuff I can kind of deal with. But the Szayel thing was brilliant. That was actually a stroke of genius. I loved it. I thought it was really good. But let me know in the comments below, guys, what you thought of this week's chapter. Did you like it? And really, what did you think of Szayel coming back? Did you think it was a good idea, or were you a bit iffy on the whole thing? Or, what did you think of Nemu's death? I thought the whole chapter was pretty gory and gruesome, but, I kind of like it because it adds to the despair a bit. And mainly what I want to ask you guys is, what do you think of the ending? What do you think of Pernida's possible death? Do you think it's as much rubbish as I do? Let me know. And as always, guys, please subscribe. I'd super appreciate your support, and give this video a thumbs up. That'd be great. But until next time, guys, see ya.